Hello there. I'm out at Karamat with a couple of my favorite people in the world. My guru, Morris Kochanski, and another one of my teachers behind the camera on the other side there, Randy Bruzma. We're out at the site we do our courses at today, and our project for this video is going to be we're going to make a bough bed, an elevated bough bed that also doubles as a stretcher. I guess Morris doesn't need any introduction. Everybody knows who that cat is. So basically, there's a few strategies for doing this, but we're going to keep it really simple. We want to be a little ways off the ground. So you can see here we've got a couple of logs set down that are maybe about an arm span apart. So the next component we're going to need is a couple of really sturdy rails. These we need to be able to entrust the person's safety with, because if you're carrying an injured person and this breaks, and plus it needs to be long enough where in fact you can put two people on either end if need be. So they have to be not only strong, but they have to be relatively long. So those are going to be what goes down first.
Yeah, the whole issue here is that if you find a stick that's parallel or close to the ground, it's untrustworthy. It's got to be, you got to cut a vertical standing tree, and then you'll be sure that you won't be able to break it with body weight.
The type of tree is probably important too. If this was an aspen tree, likely no matter how sound it was, I would be a little nervous. These are well seasoned jack pine actually, or spruce. So I'm going to set these a little bit wider than shoulder width apart, and these ones tend to be a little more parallel. They can be slightly tapering, but we're gonna keep them almost parallel. The next component we need 3 cross pieces. So there's some specific spacing that we want to occur with these cross pieces, and what that is we need enough space for the person's hips and shoulders to be able to fit through these 2 first cross pieces. That is for comfort, so that they're not sitting on something rigid. You're going to see how we set up
at the back of the knee.
Back of the knee, yeah, to roughly the back of the neck. So the one by the feet isn't so important. We want to keep it.
This third stick is counterintuitive to some people, but there's a book where the guy showed how to build a stretcher and to give more handles. That's where I got the idea of putting the stick at the back of the knee, because when they would try to, you need like a dozen people to carry one individual, and it helps to be able to put that under the back of the knee, and it does no effective discomfort.
Right.
And then it occurred to me that if I'm going to use sticks that will give some under the hip, I got to foreshorten the distance. And when you foreshorten it from your head to the back of the knee, then the sticks you're using, finger sticks, that when you lay on it, it gives under your hip, which you can't achieve the full length because you'll fall through.
Right.
Because in bushcraft, I've got that, to make a platform you have to use poles. And there are people that when they copy from me, I can tell that they took that from bushcraft, they didn't realize that I have improved on it since. that cross stick under the back of the knee is quite the revolution.
Crucial. Okay, that's interesting to know the history. I don't think I knew that. That's pretty cool. A couple of rails we're going to put down next. For this application, they're going to be parallel to our carrying rails. These don't need to be so robust.
The side where you're sitting facing the fire, that's the robust pole. The other, you could get away with half the thing. You're not sitting on it.
Right.
You're just a structural member.
We're going to use a special knot here called the jam knot, or you hear it referred to as the Canadian jam knot, or you see it in the odd knot book.
The only time I've seen that is in Dave Canterbury. In one book he calls it the jam knot, the other book he calls it the Canadian jam knot.
Right, okay. Well, there you go. Well, any way we can.
I'm sensitive to such things.
You'll also see it as an arbor knot when they're talking about fish line and the fishing knots.
It's actually, Tom Roycroft, he's the one that brought it to my attention. He said that it's the common knot that butchers are taught to truss up wherever you have to tie up any types of like crown roasts and stuff. So he learned that from a butcher. At some course the butcher said, oh, here's a knot, you know, that I am sort of quite taken by, and when he showed it to Tom, so the jam knot is, I would say, the most useful knot in creation. And I've said that for quite a few years, and anybody that wants to argue against that, I'll put them in their place very quickly about why I choose to be the knot that is so useful in its practical sense, and especially in survival.
You come on a course with us and you're likely to be fairly sick of the jam knot by the end of the course because we use it for so many things. So I'm starting to snug up the corners. You notice I didn't crank one corner tight because as soon as I do that it just throws everything
yeah, if you're pulling it with all your might, disrupts everything else. So you got to sort of get it to the point where the disruption doesn't happen. Then you come back and you tie it with an unbelievable force. That's, you know, that's the knot lends itself to that. Keeping in mind that the best material is the jam knot. The jam knot, I mean the paracord, the 550-200, and the jam knot, they are made for each other. There's something, I think technically it's 18% stretch in paracord. So if you take 100 unit paracord and stretch it as high as you can, it stretches to 18.
Okay.
So that's a danger, but that elasticity contributes to the power of the knot. That's why you can tie, because if you're trying to tie the same thing with, let's say, cotton string or something, expect to be disappointed because you need that elasticity in the jam knot to make it so fiercely powerful.
And the slipperiness a little bit too, eh?
Yeah, yeah.
So some of that force Morris is talking about. Now we can start cranking these. They're a little bit snugged, so we can start cranking them tight.
Yeah, using. There's a number of ways to create a pull. If you're using a long stick like that, there are certain circumstances where you actually use your upper thigh. And you use that as a leader.
Okay.
Yeah, that helps to.
I'll try that the next one.
And the other thing too is expect that if something lets go, the elasticity of the paracord can hit you in the eyeball.
Oh yeah, or pull it back muscle.
Because I've had that happen once to myself, and it's happened to students that you know, it's like especially if you take the strings out of the core, you can actually break the string. And if it breaks long enough to reach your eye, it's like the end of a bullwhip. So you got to watch out for that. That means that the pull, you try to misalign it.
Yeah.
So as you're really getting a pull, I turn my head like this to finish it, whereas I don't look so that it's in line.
Okay, yeah.
Worst thing I did is there was a paracord, and the end of the string was hidden under a log. And I thought, oh, I pulled on it and it resisted. I pulled harder and harder, and here there was a lump of ice on the end of the string, and it hit me right in the eyeball. And that's the second time in my life when I got hit in the eyeball, and I said, do I still have an eye? So you got to always watch that. When you're using paracord or nylon cord for putting up a clothesline, I've seen people overdo it and pull all might, and it breaks, and that rope hits them in the chest. It hurts severely.
I'll see.
To watch that. I made the mistake of putting up a chalk line, nylon chalk line, and there was a nail on the other end, and when I was finished, boards that are overhanging the eaves of a building I was building. Then I was too lazy to go up there and just draw the nail. Instead I pulled on the chalk line.
Oh boy.
And it pulled the nail out.
There's a
And the
projectile.
nail hit me in the eye.
Oh boy, the eye of all
And
places.
it was lucky it was the head of the nail, not the pointy end of the nail. That's now when you're learning the jam knot, there's a lot of merit to be able to learn it blindfolded, which means that you can, when you're using the jam knot to tie a pair of ski shoes together, you may use as many as 40 knots to build a pair of ski shoes. And if you can tie the knot blindfolded, then darkness is no problem. You can continue building a lot of things without having to see what you are doing. And also the learner, when they learn to tie without the use of their eyes, they'll retain it far longer in their lifetime than they will when they learn it superficially. So it's one of those sort of things where the motions and everything can allow you to work in total darkness. I think that if you set it up, when you've got bigger logs, you pull on it until when you pluck the paracord, especially if you take the strings from inside, you can actually make a harp. But I usually pull it until I get the note of G.
The note of G.
I prefer G.
Okay. We're very close to completion here. A couple more components. One more knot to tie. If this was just a bed, I likely wouldn't have tied this, but I tied this one for a reason. Because I need to, ordinarily there's no real force on it other than straight down. Because it's a stretcher.
So here you got a stretcher, you got a travois, you got a bed. What else? There are the same sequence of construction and steps. Pretty well the same number of sticks. It's all the same.
Okay, so we've got a frame that's lashed together, but the issue is if we want to continue and use this as a stretcher, and you're carrying it down a path and up and down hills, it's going to want to go trapezoid. So we're going to add a diagonal.
I was a consultant, the Revenant, and when I looked at their stretcher that they built, I said, "Where did you get that?"
And it was good or bad?
Oh, bad. Really unrealistic. I don't know who designed that.
So the diagonal can either go between the two cross pieces, or
well,
can go
there are various
parallel,
ways to. You know, if you don't make the sticks parallel, you make the sticks coffin shape. So generally, the widest part is your shoulders, and your feet actually can come down. So you can learn how to bring that in, and when you lash it, the rigidity is there because it's not a perfect rectangle or square. It's a trapezium. Generally, the other thing you can do is actually these sticks at your feet or maybe at your head. If you don't make it square, make it purposely a little.
Oh, like these here can actually be. These don't have
if they're
to be
like that, you don't have to brace it.
Ah, genius.
Because it'll have a natural rigidity.
Okay.
But if you're going to use a brace, then lay the brace, so you lash that side, including the end of the brace and then that way you don't have to. It's like incorporated.
Yeah. And then underneath for comfort. So it's out of sight, out of mind.
So if you have it that way, because if you're pulling a great deal, and there's other sort of things where you find you're uncomfortable with the fact that it's loose. When I was in a pinch, one time we had to build a stretcher real fast, and I just grabbed my Roycraft pack frame and I plunked it on there.
Yes, yeah.
And it was the ready rigid.
I have to see that stuff.
It took a lot of experimentation to come up with the movable.
Oh, right. This is also part of the movable.
Yeah,
the base
the
for the movable.
That, one thing led to another. It took like 25 years before I came up with the idea of trying to imitate the igloo. And then all the variants that I got and they accumulated, it wasn't overnight. It was a slow process of a little here, a little there. But the issue, that when people say, "Can I learn to survive without an axe?" Well, there's all kinds of things that you learn after a while down the road, that moving to your fuel pile rather than
Moving the
cutting
fuel
the
pile
wood
to
and
you, yeah.
moving the firewood in front of your shelter, that it's not that, it's, if a shelter is movable, then you just simply drag it a few yards. But there are circumstances where you can build it so ultra light that you can travel, when the conditions are right, and you would take your shelter with you and then not have to keep rebuilding it every time. And you're using a travois concept to be able to drag your shelter where you go.
Yes, and if you folks are trying to visualize what Morris is talking about, so this framework is very similar to the framework we do when we build a super shelter. So the one behind Morris there, I don't know if you guys can see that, but so essentially we build that frame on this whole issue, and then we can pick it up, the shelter and all, and we can drag it to our fuel supply.
Now, in isolating your stretcher, Tom Roycroft showed me a shelter. All you needed was 2 sticks that would, hold the weight, and a string to keep the poles from spreading. And then you use long enough boughs, and you could build a stretcher in minutes.
So say that again?
The main stretcher, let's say you got a short distance. Let's say you got to carry by somebody, less than a mile
out
or
of
something.
the bush into a vehicle.
2 poles, and
Yeah.
you're using the string between the poles to keep the string keeps them from spreading.
Okay, right?
So you got a string there, and you got a string there.
Yeah.
And then the way he got long boughs, that the tops, the butt ends there and the tops are far enough, done like this, and you had a platform instantaneously without lashing.
Right.
And so you had a stretcher ready in minutes, not
fast as
like
you can
lashing
get
a stretcher.
Okay.
So if they had to carry somebody to a vehicle because they needed to be carried because they were so injured, it was the stretcher was. And you're going to use the box spring.
Yes.
Well, Tom hadn't come up with that idea ever.
Oh,
he just used long boughs that were,
Ah.
patterned on there, and that would be enough to keep a person on that, on the stretcher.
Right. I could just lift that whole frame up to just a second camera. So again, so this is the frame now, the stretcher frame, right? And this is just the 2 logs that it's lifted. So that's the idea, is the frame is liftable off of our support logs.
And of course, I don't know if you retain that, but it occurred to me after a while that I could ski shoe all day and then my sleeping platform. So I purposely would build my ski shoes so thin and flexible that they would actually give under my hips. And it occurs that here's a snowshoe. You use it all day in getting to where you are, and then you sleep on it. That's a sleeping platform.
And then bows across. So he said this set's getting a little weathered.
I find with the sticks, there's usually probably, if your stick's a little thick, withdraw a few. If your sticks are you're too bendy, add a few. So, and the most common material is your, you probably can get away with 7 thumb thick sticks. And there, of course, the bundle you picked up is according to the flexibility of the that amount of resiliency under your hip. It makes such a difference over my career. Probably I'd be dead by now if I didn't learn how to make those sticks that are flexible under my hips. And then you start at the head end. Very often I make at least a survival twig bundle, if not a signal fire bundle, and that's my pillow. And then we have a system of crossing our boughs. I still see some of the old people, they make a framework and then they stand up twig ends that are 10 inches long. That takes a day to build one of those beds compared to...
Yeah, 3 minutes. This is a hug-sized bundle of elbow to fingertip, the soft ends of a spruce. All of our conifers are okay. Well, then if you don't have conifer, you can use the tips off your understory and saplings too. So essentially, all we're doing is we're crossing the tips at 90 degrees to each other, and we're putting them down at 45 degrees to the sill logs. So we're sleeping on the tips, and then the butts are all to the outside.
Yeah, and you don't have to carry on the bed past the back of your knees. So a third of your bed doesn't require boughs. Put the boughs that you would have made beyond the back of your knees, put it instead where they're more needed, or therefore you use less boughs. Generally, a good hug-sized bundle of boughs should be sufficient. Generally, to build one of these bush beds the way we go there, if somebody's in a rush, I prove to people I build one in 15 minutes. And of all the things I show certain people, they've been, camping and building layers of boughs on the ground, and they're astounded how comfortable a bed we can make because we have this approach here. When you carry a foam, open cell foam with a closed cell foam on it, the open cell foam only needs to be actually from the back of your neck to the back of your knees. All the rest of the foam you're carrying is a waste because you don't really utilize it. Because beyond the back of your knees, the sticks are enough support, and then carrying on your bed to the better length that may look neater, but doesn't serve any useful function.
And like Morris said, a twig bundle for fire starting, or even just another couple handfuls of...
I suppose a nice demo to take to frostbite, to make a complete bed like what you're doing, that people can actually see you build the bed, to incorporate the perfect thicknesses of poles and the perfect everything. That I think is since you spend 1/3 of your existence sleeping, to make a comfortable bed is a big issue.
So you think those boughs would add a lot of weight, but they don't. It's actually quite surprising how light the stretcher actually is. Some people are pretty surprised to find it. It's not that heavy at all.
If I had I had parachutes once that were so intact that if I shook them in the right way and so on, the parachute started to fill with air. And then my kids would attach the parachutes to a toboggan. And if you're heading for a barbed wire fence, you've got to have to spill the parachute. There was these 5 holes, so you pointed it down, the parachute would start up pretty soon, it's going vertical. Well, you could attach that parachute if you had it, and you could go miles. You could just ride on build it, so you could use it as a sled.
Very comfortable. I could sleep on that, no problem.
Yes.
The application for this might be, I teach this one in search and rescue actually. And the application is if you're not positive, help is coming, but you don't know if your situation gets critical enough where you have to, forest fire's coming, or your patient worsens where you actually have to transport. So now you've got them on a bed, or him or her on a bed that they have great comfort, hopefully a fire nearby. And if you do have to get them out of there, you don't have to disturb them. You can simply just tie them on and lift them up and go.
There are some people that find it repugnant to use fires the way you're supposed to, because I think they have a mistaken notion of ecological issues. Bough beds, that's like, what do you call it? That's a hanging. You should be hung for making bough beds. You should be hung by building a campfire. And so there are these people that come in, I'll say, if you have an accident and you don't know how to keep your victim warm and comfortable and so on, and the lawyer hires me, you're going to really end up having a problem. That your professionalism is, you must know to be able to make the victim as comfortable as possible, and as from the point of view using fire, using natural materials, and on and on. But anyway, in my line of work, I was very consumptive. I've made hundreds, thousands of bough beds and so on. And I might be operating in an area for many, many years, and you still, unless you know what you're looking for, you still can't tell how
That's right.
many, because nature sort of, if I remove a certain amount, nature says, oh gee, there's an opening for me,
Yeah.
and then it expands.
Flourishes, yeah.
And so you come into a situation and you find that there's no dead trees, there's no crooked trees, there's no sick trees and everything. But to the person who doesn't realize that, they say, oh, how come it's so groomed? Because you've done it in such a way that you extracted everything and the forest was the happier for it. Instead of saying, oh, I get a lot of flack for my bough beds. And a lot of flack I had to defend myself at the university level. I said, so what are you saying? If you got a victim and I don't have the resources that I've proven to myself and proven to whatever in my professionalism that I can make people, as comfortable as possible. But anyway, a very nice demonstration. Clear cut, essential. When you're making a stretcher, you can also lash that bottom long poles. You can leave them out. So I often would say to people, okay, just in case we need a stretcher, Joe, your bed is the stretcher. So he focuses on, so there is a stretcher in camp.
Right.
And
Okay.
if we need one,
Yeah.
Joe's shelter is going to provide that stretcher.
Yeah.
And the other thing we might not have mentioned is that you can look at your signal fire and your whole setup that you've got here. Actually, you're in the back of your mind saying, can I incorporate all the materials for one good signal fire? And that's my bed. And should I set off my signal fire and I'm worried that I haven't been detected, that I quickly convert my bed to the new signal fire and then build my bread, because very often one plane is flying by and in a very short while another one follows it. And you're not ready for it because you...
Or maybe one couldn't stop, he didn't have time, and in his mind he's going to check it out on the way back, but smoke's gone.
So there's that relationship. The amount of really good bough bed is the makings for a really good signal fire. So you sort of have juggled with that notion. So the bed is the materials for a signal fire, the travois for moving heavy objects, the stretcher for that, and then the framework for the... Happens that the framework all comes in to be just the sort of thing to build to anchor all the ends. That's the two sticks, one above the other. Allows you to be able to make a framework that holds up, and then it becomes movable.